Hello everybody, my name is Prescott Balch. I am a technology guy. I am not anti-data center. I am anti-data center in the wrong places. I learned from working in a bank there is no risk-free reward. They not only travel in pairs, they almost always travel in equal-sized pairs. In summer 2025, one of these proposals landed in my community. We thought it was a terrible location, low-density residential area, nowhere near any commercially viable area, and our land use plan had zoned it residential accordingly. And we thought it was financially a bad idea because of the financial concentration risk and the size imbalance of a small village, large corporation. I've since learned so much more, and I have tried to help communities in many states understand the risks and rewards so they can make fully informed decisions. So let's dive into these risks and rewards. Here's some data from Northern Virginia on direct employment, surely a statistically significant sample size of 565 facilities, 10,000 plus jobs, which equates to approximately 18 jobs per building. In fairness, that is across a wide variety of sizes and vintages of data centers, and hyperscale data centers likely beat that average given their size, but it sure pays to be skeptical of these promises. I do think Google's estimates of 130 for 4 buildings is reasonable, in stark contrast to some other tech company pitches in other communities. On the plus side, Google is also tying those numbers to its tax abatement, giving you some protection against under-delivery. On the minus side, though, technology as an industry exists to automate human activity, including the tech industry's own human activity. Tech labor is expensive, and the number of people per square foot of data center space has been dropping since the first data center. So whatever the promised number is, you can expect it to be the maximum, not the minimum. Indirect economic development. Economic development people will use the phrase multiplier effect often when talking about the benefits of development. In traditional large-scale development, lots of new employees become residents, they need housing, restaurants, shops, grocery stores, etc. And then those things need new employees, and then those employees spark more of the same. The economic development people I've heard normally quote a ratio of 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 to predict the number of jobs created by a single new job from a data center. I have never seen anyone except Google claim 9 to 1. And I'm not convinced the ratio will even be 3 to 1. The problem is simply scale. The absurd extreme is 1 job. If Google hires only a single person, that isn't going to create 3 jobs, let alone 9. At the other extreme, 1,000 new jobs might generate 2,000 to 3,000 total jobs. The problem is the Duluth metro area is large enough that it can absorb 130 jobs without any indirect economic benefit. You really have to have some scale before the multiplier effect comes off the 0 on the number line. Where that cutoff is, I don't know, but common sense tells you that 130 jobs has indirect economic impact only on the smallest of towns. And as for running the business of a data center itself, they're notoriously bad for attracting other businesses, whether it's supply chain businesses or geographically neighboring businesses. If you don't believe me, head over to datacentermap.com and find a small city that has some data centers and see how much development has gone up around those data centers over the last decade. Now for construction jobs. A professor at Ball State University, a professor of economics named Michael Hicks, wrote an article called Data Centers and Local Job Creation. It was a study that compared neighboring counties, one with and one without data center construction activity. Interestingly, the author found no real increase in employment in either construction or technology sectors. The jobs were just moving around and not being created. Your community will likely see some short-term economic benefit from the movement of those construction jobs to your immediate vicinity, but the jobs are not created. I understand it's just one study. My advice here is simply to be skeptical of all the claims. As for school tax revenue, you do have a nice clause in here that is providing your school tax $40 million over 28 years or $1.4 million a year average on top of the school property taxes that Google is paying. The reason for doing that is I believe both parties understand that the normal school property taxes are not additive to the school's budget, and that, like the state that I live in, you have a problem where as the property valuation goes up, the school withdraws state funding dollar for the increase in property value per student. So the data center property tax that's being paid will not increase school spending. It will not lower resident school property tax bills, but the state will get a windfall into their state aid fund. So that $40 million over 28 years is additive and it is good, but it is the only benefit that the school district will see. So the next question is tax abatement really even necessary? Well, the terms of recent deals are going the other way, and you probably have more leverage here than you think you do. Microsoft announced in early 2026 that they would no longer seek property tax abatement on any of their new data center deals. And there was a recent deal in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. The Minnesota-based Oppidan data center developer proposed building a small $72 million data center. They not only did not request any tax abatement, but they also offered a $6.5 million unrestricted donation to the city at the close of the deal. $6.5 million is 9% of the data center's value. So at Google's estimated 1.8 valuation, imagine that kind of donation percentage to Hermantown. That would be some real money. I'm not saying you'll get it, but you are offering terms here that are more like the 2024-2025 deals. The next risk is financial concentration. I've seen estimates of $1.8 billion in valuation from the full build-out of the data center campus. Hermantown's valuation is currently only $1.3 billion. So the question that you have to ask yourselves is, are you comfortable with getting that much tax revenue from one taxpayer in one industry? What if there's a valuation reduction in the future? Well, your taxpayers have to pick up that delta. The developer or the owner of the data center could simply also just challenge the assessment later. The AI bubble could burst and it could haircut the valuation because we've overbuilt and they're worth less money per building. Worst case, what if the future property owner of the data center hits serious financial problems? Well, when the property is a fraction of 1% of your total valuation, like most buildings, those are absorbable fluctuations. But when the data center is 58% of your total valuation, you are going to be extremely sensitive to any changes in that valuation of that building, and your taxpayers will take it on the chin if that valuation drops. So that takes me to the big bet. This is, in my opinion, what the decision boils down to, at least financially. The project is definitely once in a lifetime, but it is a bet. It's a bet that the large amount of municipal infrastructure you build and pay for with tax abatement will generate enough indirect economic activity to justify locking up so much tax abatement over a long period of time. You're going to lock up 7% of, or 70% of your total tax abatement, your most important economic development tool, and you're going to lock it up on one very long-running project. And at one extreme, the extension of the infrastructure will generate robust economic development along that corridor, reducing the amount of abatement you might need to entice that future development. With significant growth, you increase your tax revenue and Google's abatement becomes a smaller percentage of your city's abatement cap. On the other extreme, though, the extension of infrastructure does very little to stimulate that development, and you have given Google a free ride to build that infrastructure to support their choice of location. And you have added maintenance costs from the sizable infrastructure built for the city. Trying to be really balanced here, neither extreme is likely the reality, though both are worth assessing. The real answer is somewhere along that continuum. Emotional arguments will tend to attach themselves to one extreme or the other, but the healthier discussion answers the following questions. How much development do we need to generate to make this a good deal for us? Do we have historical examples of companies wanting to build here but being dissuaded by the lack of municipal infrastructure? Will we regret the decision if we get zero development? Will we regret the decision if we get a lot of development? It is not a given that a lot of development is what everybody wants. And lastly, here are my references to all of the data that I've quoted, all of the studies that I've quoted. And I'll close with, this is the biggest decision your community will ever make. I don't pretend to know what's right for your city. I don't know what your community envisions for its future or why people live there. and I don't know your collective risk appetite either. But don't let hope be your strategy. Put your assumptions and projections to paper, show best and worst case, be honest about the risks and rewards. Unfortunately, I've seen precious few communities have a really open, transparent, and balanced discussion of risk and reward. I hope your community can be one of them. Good luck.